You're saying the retail chain is for big brands, big names. It doesn't impact me. Why should I care? I think you should, because it impacts the prices of things you buy. Any industry that requires manufacturing, production, sales, distribution, customer experience, and then monetization of their products, their service, or content falls under the retail chain. Is every part of this chain really working? Policy would always lag innovation because it's natural. The struggle when it comes to our continent as to why the lag is so much, because now the innovation has happened, people can see that there's adoption, and it seems like there is no policy around it. The people who are innovating and the people who are making policies are on two different sides of the spectrum. People assume that if it's Nigerian, then it's fake or not. That all of that thought is coming because that part of the chain is considered to be weak. One of the strongest customer experience and CRM tools that we use on the continent were built by foreigners. So for you who is a content creator, every part of the chain is important. And if you're a small business owner, how can you play in those areas and try FROG, which is friends, relations, organization, government. If you don't get FRO, chances are you won't get government, and you would wait till it becomes a national problem. Hi there, my name is Eneje. Welcome to this episode of Beyond Transactions. Today we'll be talking about retail technology, why it matters, and in a way why I've been talking to some of the people. I've been talking to some of the people that you will get to meet in future episodes and some that you've already met before. As we dive into this, we'll be looking at how it all intersects, how they all come together, what they mean, and how it can impact your life, no matter what you think you do, and if you actually fit into the retail chain. So let's dive into it. So what's a retail chain? And why is ours considered to be broken? Well, a retail chain is made up of several facets within the distribution, manufacturing, production, sales, customer experience of any product, any content, right? So think about how you get to watch videos, right? And you're telling yourself, nah, it's entertainment because it's a music video where people are dancing. Actually, it's part of the retail chain. Why? Because there is the production aspect, right? People had to produce that content. They had to write the script. They had to produce it. They had to film it, package it together. So there's the packaging of that product, right? So now you have the product, you have the packaging of the product. Now they have to distribute it, which is the channel to which you see it, right? So that's another part of the chain where distribution comes in. So they are looking at putting it on the internet, putting it on TV, putting it on, a streaming platform. However that product will be distributed, however you get to experience it is the distribution. Then there is the customer experience, your typical review, how people go to talk about the movie, what people say about it, word of mouth distribution, and all of those things become feedback to know whether, for network channels, many times they use how people interact and the ratings of a movie to tell if a series will continue, if there will be a part 2 of that movie. All of these things are part of the retail chain. And you say this is something you consider entertainment. The same thing happens with technology, with your hardware manufacturing, your computers, with hairs, any industry that requires manufacturing, production, sales, distribution, customer experience, and then monetization of their products, their service, or contents falls under the retail chain. So when you look at this, you start to ask ourselves, is every part of this chain really working, especially for the African continent, and we overlook it because in the greater scheme of things, we see a lot of other continents thriving across the chain. You see continents that have high manufacturing performances, high production performances, high distribution performance, high customer experience. People complain about how customer experience is a struggle in our part of the world, and then it's a huge industry somewhere else. There are so many CX tools that we use today, from CRM tools to general CX tools that we even use here that are not built here, and many people don't even know about them because it is not considered to be part of the retail chain. When we think retail here, we think about, sales, you're buying products so that you can give direct to customer. But realistically, there are so many things that happen down the chain, and it feels broken for us because we have some aspects that are performing well and some aspects that are struggling. Best way to explain this, if you get a chain, right, and this chain is like maybe 3 mm thick, so it is really strong, and you have another part of the chain that is 1 mm thick, and then you have another part of the chain that is like 0.5 mm thick, and then you kind of lay them together, right? The issue with that chain is whenever push comes to shove and there is a force, right, the 3 chain would hold and probably be the reason why the 0.5 part of the chain or the metal that is 0.5 would break, right? So when you have aspect of that chain that is weaker than the other, when people are thinking, yes, at least payment is working, payment is working, so we have something amazing, it affects the entire chain, because when it is put in line with everything else, it is so strong, it is causing trouble for the 0.5 of distribution, or 0.5 of sales, or 0.5 of manufacturing. And that's why you can have great manufacturers who you will go, oh, Nigerian products are not good. They are not, they are, people assume that if it's Nigerian, then it's fake or not. That all of that thought is coming because that part of the chain is considered to be weak, or that part of the chain is being taken for granted, or is not being looked at. So why is ours considered to be broken? It's a thing we all do. We pay attention to the part that we think is thriving, that seems to be making money, or the part that people care about, and we forget that that part in itself can become a problem to the rest because it's becoming too strong. One side of the chain cannot hold everything. If you chain a dog and the part holding the dog is weak, the dog is going to get loose. If everything is strong, you have a proper chain. And I think that's something we need to really start paying attention to as a people. And how we can fix it is considering that if our payments is strong, our manufacturing has to be strong, meaning we have to take manufacturing and production very seriously. We have to be sure that we are looking at how things are produced. We are looking at the standard organization of Nigeria, how they standardize what great manufacturing is. And if you see industries that are doing this fine, you see our leather industry, our fashion industry, they're beginning to pay strong attention to manufacturing. Even our entertainment industry is beginning to produce very high quality product. You see that manufacturing is doing well. And if you see, since that part is good, payment is also thriving for it, right? So when you pay strong attention to that, you start coming back to, I think, the last part of the chain that is often taken for granted, which is customer experience, right? You take customer experience important, where when people dish out a product, they don't just want to cash out. They also want to know, okay, what are customers saying? How can we use this for the next part of our production? How do we determine whether or not we need to produce? And it happens a lot where there's a good part one of a movie and there's a terrible part two, because people were not listening to what people said about part one. What they loved about part one, they go away and just go, the money looks good, payments worked, let's just do it again, right? If customer experience is, paid attention to, you can almost tell what you should manufacture again. You can almost tell if you need to release the next product, if the next product should be better, different. Iteration becomes easy, and you would have a wonderful chain, because every part of your industry, or every industry within the system, would work. And if you do this on a larger level, you will have so many manufacturing companies thriving, you have so many sales companies thriving, you have so many payments companies thriving, and they already are, and you have so many customer experience thriving. And that's something I think if we pay attention to, we can do well as a people. I spent a lot of time talking about payments and how payments is thriving. The question will now be, if you're a small business, does that mean you have to build a payment to play at that level? How do you manage your part? So say you create something, for example. So maybe you're at the creation level or the creators level, right? How do you then start distributing? Let's dive into that a bit. I'm going to use something that many people don't even consider to be part of the retail chain, right? I'm going to use something as basic or as simple, because it's not so simple, as content creation. The idea that content creation is entertainment, or is for social media, or there's a separation between content creation, creator, content creator, social media content creator. There's a lot of separation amongst all of them. But if we break it down to its most granular level, what is content? Content is literally anything that is consumable, right? Meaning, if I apply it to my skin, it's consumable. If I drink it, eat it, if it goes through my mouth, it's consumable. If it plays around my five senses, it's consumable. Meaning, if I'm seeing it, I'm watching it, it's consumable. If I'm hearing it, that's why music is content. Visuals are content. What you eat is content. The cream is content. And you're wondering, okay, where does smell come in? The perfume you wear, it's content, right? And any form of content, and you're creating at any level, and you look at how it fits into people's successes, how perfume, which is content in a way, in like content in itself, perfume is content, how it has become such a huge market, it's considered luxury. and it plays in the luxury markets, you start asking yourself, how have they thrived? And you as a small business, you're wondering, okay, if I'm just a creator, I'm not doing that, I'm creating content, how can I also thrive? How can I distribute? You look at it like this. The most important thing in this process is to look for your own channel, right? The people who manufacture understand that their channel of distribution is, to a certain group of people. They are in a certain place and they have the fund to carry it out. With content and maybe social media content itself, how you want to distribute it is the fact that you already have access to the internet. With the internet, you have a huge market of people that you can connect with, especially if you're building a community around your content. That is distribution happening in that moment. So if you're a content creator and you're watching this and you're asking yourself, how does the retail chain concern me? Or what part of the retail chain should I pay attention to? I would say every part. Because unlike many companies that can handle just being manufacturers and focus on that, and get another company to partner with to be distributors and focus on that, and then get someone else to handle payments and focus on that, you are sort of creating a product that requires you to distribute and monetize yourself, right? The advantage is that channels already exist. So for you who is a content creator, every part of the chain is important. You have to come back to how you create your content, your manufacturing process. This is where you're thinking, what camera should I use? What mobile device should I use? What type of lighting should I use? How should I edit the video? What are the cuts I should put in my video? This is your manufacturing process. You have to be very critical about it, because if you want to get high value clients, you want to create high value product, or at least create the idea of a high value product. So your content has to go through that strict manufacturing process. The content of your product itself has to be great. Meaning, what are you saying? What does it mean? The people that you are serving it to, does it serve them? When you fix that, the next thing for you is distribution. Ask yourself, the type of content I've created, is it for YouTube? Is it for Instagram? Is it for Facebook? Is it for Twitter, which is X? Or is it for LinkedIn? And many times we mix our distribution channels, and you will see some people who have hacked it, right? They don't bother themselves getting an Instagram account. They don't bother themselves being on LinkedIn. They just tell themselves, what, my channel is YouTube, and they thrive marvelously because they figured out what their distribution channel should be. So for you as a content creator, once you're done with manufacturing, start asking yourself, what should be my distribution channel? Where should I distribute? Where's the best place for this content? When you're done with that, the next thing you want to start looking at in that chain is monetization, right? Because it's almost nothing if you're not monetizing it. It's just a hobby, right? So you have to start looking at, okay, now that I've distributed, this distribution I've done, how am I monetizing it? Am I making money off it? What would be my revenue plan, right? Would my revenue plan be that I'm going to charge the people who receive this content? Obviously, YouTube is not for you if you want to do that. Like you because the people who are watching it are watching it for free, right? So you start thinking, how do I want to do this? Maybe I'm going to put it up on a stage and do a stage play, or I'll put this product as a cinema movie and have people go see it in the cinema, because you want your customers to pay. If your monetization is, I want brands to pay, you start thinking, okay, I'm going to put my product in a way where the people who would watch this would be so large that brands are going to go, I want to market my stuff to your audience. So I want to work with you. So brands become your monetization plan. Another thing is the distribution channels themselves. Do they pay you to create? So you start looking at that. Which of these distribution channels will pay me to produce? So I produce my content, put it there, and this channel is just going to pay me. So I'm going to make money there. That monetization is so important. Then comes my favorite part of the chain, which is customer experience. It is so easy to just create and distribute, and then you start making money and you think you're fine. But you see, to consistently do the same circle within the chain and ensure that no part of the chain ever get broken for you as a content creator is CX. And you start thinking, I'm just one guy with a phone. What do you mean customer experience? Every comment, every like, every interaction, what people are saying, those things are your CX. They are your customer experience. You're seeing how your customers are experiencing your product. You're taking that information to go, okay, they would like to see this type of content tomorrow. This content aligns with what I'm doing. Okay, I'm going to create this because this is what they want to see. This is how you play across the chain. And this is how content creation can thrive in this chain or within the retail chain. So we've seen giants in payments like Paystack, Flutterwave, MoneyPoint. These are unicorns already. And we see them thriving there. Now, the struggle is what happens to manufacturing? How many distribution companies are playing at that level? How many CX companies that are African are playing at that level? And they are quite a few. They exist, but they are quite a few. And, we start asking why, and if you're a small business owner, how can you, you know, play in those areas and thrive? Because you're not doing payments. How can you be a manufacturer and thrive? Um, I think it's to first, as a society, start changing how we perceive what an economic impact is, right? A lot of the time, I think a long time ago, a friend of mine said something. He taught me something. Well, he taught a group, and I was in the group. He taught us something called the frog method. He said the frog impacts how any business would work, right? And frog is FROG, which is friends, relations, organization, government, right? So as a small business owner, this is super important, right? This is super important because the first set of people that will take you very seriously when you start out your business are your friends. They're the ones that would, be your first buyers to encourage you, right? Except you build a product that they really need and it is good. So it's always going to be your friends. Your relations won't believe in you in the beginning, but when they're hearing your friends and their friends talk about how, man, you're doing big, you're doing this, you make clothes, for example, and that they saw your clothes in this person's hand and it's really good, your relatives start to feel proud of you, and then they join in and they start buying because they want to be affiliated with your success. So the R comes in. Right now, after the R comes organization. Right, organizations are going to start saying you and say, okay, let's partner together. Let's see what we can do to raise this thing that you do. Right, so you have organizations come in, and then at that point, government is going to go, okay, this thing would benefit our economy before the government come in. You see, with payments, it was the other way around. Right, with payments, the reason why payment infrastructure has been so successful in Africa is because, let's be honest, our governments actually got involved. They paid attention to the biggest problem that was highlighted in our society. There was always payment struggle, financial fraud, and because of this, our government said, you know what, let's prove that we can solve the financial fraud issue. So you had your central banks, especially in Nigeria, you had your central bank paying attention to this. You had InterSwitch paying attention to this. How had InterSwitch working with your government, paying attention to this. All of this collaboration forced our banking system. We were doing transfers before some of the biggest fintechs came about. You could do instant transfers because before some of the biggest fintech came about. That infrastructure, right, that was laid made it possible for small companies, organizations to get in, build on the infrastructure that already existed, and then succeed. Now, as I was saying earlier, for you that's a small business, you follow the frog method to get to where you want to get to. But as an institution, right, everyone who start getting the attention of the government, the moment as a collective we get the attention of the government, this is where the economic impact comes in. We have to now come together to show the government that, look, this manufacturing is so important and I'm not the only one playing it. So many people are playing it that if the government plays within this, because the government is not going to do business, right? If the government says, okay, this looks like something that as a society I can fix because a lot of you in your industry are really getting our attention, then they start putting those infrastructure or they start laying the groundwork that can scale it, that can make it a giant, right? But before you get there, always remember the frog. Always ask yourself, this thing I'm even producing, do my friends think it valuable? Do my relations think it valuable? Do organizations think it valuable? Because if you don't get FRO, chances are you won't get government and you would wait until it becomes a national problem or a continental problem that the government needs to pay attention to before your industry will thrive, right? And yeah, I think that's something like small businesses should look at. Always look at those 4 chains for the frog and then come up as a collective. You can't do it alone. One person cannot do it alone. If one manufacturing company is successful, it will still not make the government think like manufacturing is where they should invest in, right? We have to have 4, 5 manufacturing companies really doing something at a high level where there's competition there and the government goes, okay, it seems like this is boosting our economy, this is creating employment. Let's see what we can do to ensure that manufacturing scales. The retail chain might sound like such a big thing and it's not your business, especially if you have like a small shop at the corner somewhere, you just run an online business and you sell your stuff on social media, or maybe you're a content creator, or maybe you're a small filmmaker and you're saying, the retail chain is for big brands, big names. It doesn't impact me. Why should I care, right? I think you should, because it impacts the prices of things you buy, right? Because you would interact with the markets that you're in. It's if one part of the chain is broken, it would affect the cost of what you buy. So take, for example, something as simple as as vegetables, right? If vegetables is being produced on one, maybe the northern part of your region, right? If you live in the western part of your region, if distribution is a problem, tomatoes, like vegetables that you have to consume, right? You would pay more for the same vegetables because the distribution from the north to the west where you are costs so much. Maybe the road is bad, or maybe there are no logistic companies that are moving at that scale, or maybe the logistic infrastructure in place when they move things go bad. So the amount of vegetable that gets to the west, if maybe 2,000 megaton of vegetables was shipped from the north to the west, and only 200 get to the west, and you need 2,000 to feed people in the west, what happens is there's a limited resource. So what will marketers do? They'll sell it at a very high price. So only those who can afford can buy. And marketers already paid for such a large scale, and this is what they got. They need to make their money back, right? So you're paying so much for the water you drink, for the food you eat, just because the distribution part of the chain was broken. That's why you should care. That's why you should pay attention to it. That's why you want to get involved. You want to start asking, this thing I have, where was it manufactured? Okay, why do I have to pay? Heck, something as simple as a vehicle, right? Because we don't pay attention to the manufacturing aspect of vehicles that we all drive, right? So we import a lot of these vehicles, and the vehicle could cost a certain amount, and importation and the clearing of that particular vehicle could cost exactly 100% the price of the vehicle. So you pay that to move it in, and then it gets into your markets or it gets into your country, and then you want to buy it. You have to cover cost of the original purchase, cost of shipping, cost of clearance, right? This is because there's a poor distribution chain from manufacturing. If it was manufactured here, the items were sourced here, the items were refined here, produced here, distributed here, it will be cheaper. That's why you should care, right? So if you're thinking, well, it doesn't affect me, it does. The price of the tomato you bought yesterday, the reason why it is a little higher than the person buying it in the north is because distribution was a problem, right? The price of the shirt you're wearing, the reason why it costs a little more is because manufacturing, somebody's trying to make original cotton, and they have to import the materials, or they have to export the raw materials for someone else to refine and then import the pieces for them to put together, right? The cost that they pay, just to get that in and out, you have to pay it when you buy the final product. But if that part of the chain is fixed here, it becomes cheaper. So yes, that's definitely why you should care about the retail chain and why it is important for everybody. One of the questions we get to ask ourselves is, okay, why is all the funding going to payments, right? Every payment company seems to have raised money. And, now the human resource platforms are raising money. But when you start paying attention to the details, it's payments, because I've seen human resource platforms that the major thing they sell is payroll. So type of payments, right? I've seen agricultural systems that they raise money, and when you pay attention to what they are really offering, is the fact that payments of agricultural products has been simplified, right? So it's payments, it's payments at a different title. And even healthcare these days, a lot of health tech products are coming out and raising funds. They raise funds because why? They are resolving the payments structure. So the question is justified. Why is it that every fund seems to be going towards payments and nowhere else? Why should you then invest in a place where it seems like people are not, willing to put money in? It's simple. The risk is rather high. All right. Like I mentioned some moment ago, there's a lot of infrastructure that has been put in place from your government, your central bank as an institution. At an institutional level, infrastructures were put in place to ensure that payments worked. And payments, is working. There's so much more that can happen, There's so much more that can happen, but so much has happened that has put Africa at the front line of payments. We are doing exceptionally well. And this is because the risks were minimized based on institutions getting involved and fixing the infrastructure, right? This is what needs to happen everywhere else. There needs to be an institutionalized attention to manufacturing. And there is. But there needs to be attention given to it. The same attention that was given to payment has to be given to it. Investors also have to start understanding that if you're investing for the purpose of scaling an economy, because if an economy is improved financially, you as an investor would benefit from that economy, right? So investors have to start looking at the bigger picture. The short-term investment style obviously has to change. You have to start going, okay, I'm going to have to invest at an institutional level, right? I'm going to have to invest at, at a governmental level. I need to start looking at the fact that I'm not just going to build this startup so I can, cash out for the next investor based on valuation. I'm going to be investing because if I change how things work, from an institutional aspect of manufacturing, right? It's going to pay me off way later, and it's going to be paying me off at a huger scale, and a lot of people can start playing in that space to even make you as an investor thrive more because you now have a lot more people there. Same thing with distribution. I feel like when it comes to the chain, the most important part, even though every part of the chain is important, the most important part of the chain is distribution. But again, the risks are high. Physical distribution is impacted by security, right? And you might think these two things don't connect, but you cannot move goods from one place to the other if their chances of getting stolen are high, if the chances of your driver getting kidnapped is high, if the chances of, the road causing your distribution to break down and be stuck in a particular place, or for the item to sink in the sea, if that risk is so much because there's a certain insecurity, it impacts distribution, right? So the risks again are high, and that's why we don't see so much funding going into it. What do we need to do? The answer is I think right in front of us, is to pay attention to the institution, right? What are the security threats to the institution? What are the financial threats to the institution? What are the economical threats to the institution? And what are the cultural threats to the institution? Yes, culture also impacts the retail chain massively. Look at China. China is thriving because they understood how to leverage their culture, right? Asia is scaling at an unprecedented level, and that we see it, we see it from China to the Middle East. We can genuinely see how they are scaling without so many resources because they are paying attention to their distribution, to their production, their manufacturing, to their talent. Every part of the chain for them is very important, and they are solving it at an institutional level. And I feel like once we do that, it's easy for investors to start putting money there. This is not something a small business person can change on their own, but a lot of small businesses, forgetting themselves for a microsecond, coming together is how an institution is built. If you create something that is consumable, you've created content. The difference between a social media content creator and a filmmaker is his distribution channel, how he chooses to distribute. Why one person will put it on Instagram, the other person is going to put it on Netflix. Why one person is going to monetize brands, paying them to have brand placement or mention the name of a brand, another person is going to get investors to pull money and, help them with, creating the movie and hoping that the movie sells in the box office, at cinemas, or probably place it on a streaming platform and make their money upfront, right? In the end, both persons have created content. Both persons have just fixed themselves in where they think is best for distributing their type of content. And both persons have figured out how they want to make money off it. And I feel like if you start seeing it like that holistically, you start seeing the chain for what it is and not just a circle of where you're playing at, you will definitely thrive no matter how small you think your business is. I think it's simple as to why this is, right? And first, it is only natural that policy should lag innovation. Only natural, right? Because you can't build policy around something that has not happened. Something has to happen, people have to adopt it, and then you build a policy that, okay, hey, everybody's adopting this. Think about Rome, for example. Rome invented the toilet and the bathhouse because at some point they realized we're building a beautiful city. People like our city, but people still need to use the bathroom, right? And they were not using the bathroom. So a beautiful city that was smelling. They went, okay, no, this is not working. We need a bathhouse. So we need a communal bathhouse. We're going to build one. We need a communal restroom. We're going to build one. And we're going to have designated areas for this. I think the Jews figured this out. If you take a look at scriptures, you would see where Moses was telling the people that, okay, you know what, if you want to use the restroom, you're going to go outside the camp. We're going to have a system where we go outside the camp. So that policy only came about because people were using the restroom. It had to have happened. And, even that is not like they were innovating. People just needed somewhere to use the restroom. And that was what gave birth to the policy. Policy would always lag innovation because it's natural. the struggle when it comes to our continent as to why the lag is so much, because now the innovation has happened, people can see that there's adoption, and it seems like there is no policy around it. It's one major crime challenge, which is the people who are innovating and the people who are making policies are on two different sides of the spectrum. They're not talking together. They don't know what's going on, because the guys who are innovating don't even know the policies that existed before half the time. And then the guys who are in policy have no idea what the innovation or the innovators are innovating and who it's for. They hear it, they can see it, they have no idea who it's for, and until they start making impacts to the policymakers, they probably do nothing about it, right? Again, I'm going to reference payments. Payments is so huge because the problem of financial fraud, the problem of people being impatient about their money, the problem of people asking, how can I get my money? I transfer the money. Is all of those problems were so compounding that when the banks, when the central bank as an institution started putting down structures, policies around finance were bettered by this institution, working hand in hand with the government, the policymakers. They started building this because the problem was brought directly to the people who were going to make the policy, right? It's the same thing here. The people who are innovating have to start having conversations with the policymakers. And I think one of my episodes covered that. Now, if you are in a sector where you're thinking, okay, I'm a social media content creator, for example, and I create content on the internet, why should there be a policy around what I create? Well, first off, when you think about it, if you have an audience in your continent, in your country, I'm going to use Nigeria where I stay, for example. And in Nigeria, if I create content and the consumers of my content are Nigerians, it means I'm sort of, selling a product to a people that have a government, right? There needs to be policies that guide that, because the governments have their people being impacted by what they consume, and they are consuming something from me. There's a reason why policies must exist. The lag, however, is the fact that the channel to which I am distributing this was not built by Nigerians. The process for social media to exist within Nigeria was made open because the internet itself as a structure was made open to us, right? So you can simply change your VPN and access a particular website. That's where policies start struggling, because in sectors like that, you have innovation that is working, you have an adoption that is massive, but the connection between the tools, the distribution channels, the sales of those channels are not in any way connected to the policymakers. Like, I can make a policy around the product I did not build. It's not registered in my country. It does not concern my country. You don't need to be in my country to use it. You can change your VPN and connect to a different airspace, a different frequency, and you will use it. You can still be geographically within my country and put a different country address and use that same. So at that point, how do I build a solid policy around it? So it's the huge divide between the policymakers and the innovators. That's the struggle. And when it comes to Africa, the divide is only wider because we struggle with communicating, right? We've had instances politically where something that needs to be addressed in 24 hours is not addressed for weeks. This is a communication problem, right? Sometimes something is said, but it is communicated based on how I perceive things rather than how it should be heard, how it should be received. Sometimes I'm communicating because I belong to this region in a country and this is how we talk, right? And I assume that every region in the country should understand how I've spoken, which makes no sense if I'm communicating a national issue, right? So communication is another foundational challenge, and it doesn't just affect people in policy, because the people in policy are people. The same way the people in innovation are people. It's a people thing, and I think if as a people we start fixing those granular problems of communication, the gap between the policymakers and innovators, we would reduce the lag time. Not that we will change it completely, but we will reduce it. That lag time has to exist. Policies can only be built around things that already exist. If they don't exist, there is no need for a policy. I can't, we look at artificial intelligence today, and I hear people question, people are going to use it for bad, people are going to use it for good, people, we need policies around it. And I am a huge advocate for policies around artificial intelligence. But then again, the bigger question is, what is artificial intelligence? What's the scale to which it can grow? What will it become? We don't know. We don't know. And the moment you start putting fixed policies on something you don't know, you immediately stifle innovation. So while you are innovating and saying, I want a policy, you could be asking for your own problem because all of a sudden you are limiting just how far it can go. We need to know to a certain degree how far can it go. Can artificial intelligence actually solve world hunger? Do you want to stop it now if it's not there yet? Can artificial intelligence actually figure out a cure for cancer? Do you want to stop it now if it's not there yet? We can't set a policy around it if we don't know. The best thing we can say is data protection. And that's why when it comes to artificial intelligence, the most converse type of policy is around data. What is it doing with the information? Who is on the other end receiving it? Because when the machine is getting it, is there a human being receiving it? What are they allowed to do with it? How far can they take it? Are they only using it so that the machine can get better to solve my problem? Or are they using it so that they can understand me and then sell it to the guy selling perfumes? That's the only thing we can do now when it comes to AI, because in itself, that very technology, we do not yet understand the scope of it. This is how policy works. It needs to a great degree, understand the scope of what that innovation is and then build around it. That, okay, now we know it. We know it can go this far. We need it to stop here because this is why it needs to stop here. Yeah, that's something I think if we pay attention to as a people, we can start bridging the gap and we can solve properly. One of the interesting things about Beyond Transaction is I understand to a great degree that everything is linked. And I think a lot of people are beginning to see that everything is linked. All right. And there are a lot of conversations about who raised money, how they raised money, what their journey was like. And it's exciting, but not everybody is going to be them. You can try to walk the same path and, you would struggle. And the reason you struggle is not because you're not significant. It's not because your idea is not great. It's not because, you don't deserve to get funded. It's mostly because the path that you're playing in is genuinely not being funded at the moment, because that part of the retail chain is taken for granted, or that part of the retail chain is misunderstood, or that part of the retail chain struggles at an infrastructural level that you just can't fix, right? And what I've been doing is I've been talking to people who somehow, in different aspects of field of work are thriving. It's why I'm talking to policymakers and asking, okay, what are people doing wrong? What should they be doing? How should they, position themselves in such a way where if they can commit the next 5 years, you are willing to play the long game with them, right? You can ensure that they don't build something and you come back and say, hey, this thing you built, not going to work in my market, right? That's why I'm talking to policymakers. I'm talking to creatives because somehow they've hacked the creation, distribution, and monetization, right? And many of them did it from their rooms. And they've been able to not just do it locally, but at a global level, getting the attention of Hollywood and the US tech market space. And I want us to see that even while in that industry, they are building a proper chain for themselves. I'm talking to trade and figuring out how they are fixing cross borders, how their background, their psychic got them to, solve that problem. Because how do I distribute something from point A to point B and understand who to talk to? That's why I'm talking to these people. It's not just about who has raised money. It's also about, how can I stay exactly in the lane I am and succeed? How do I know what infrastructure to pay attention to? How do I know what institution matters to me? And the people who have done it, from the creative sector to the marketing sector to the manufacturing sector to the government to the distribution sectors, I want to know how they've done the things they've done, right? Payments, at some point I would want to talk to payment people. I would want us to even see how they feel being the giants, knowing that their part of the chain is 5,000 mm strong, and then every other person in the chain is 3 mm strong, 2 mm strong, 4 mm strong, which is very weak. I want to see how they are paying back to ensure that the rest of the chain gets strong, because the thing about this sense is it's a ripple, right? If every aspect of the chain gets strong, there is no weak link. Everybody can thrive. These are the conversations I'm having with different people. These are the kind of conversations I will be having going forward still. And I want you to be a part of it. I want you to be able to ask your questions as well. I want you to be able to reach out to say, okay, I'm going to check this episode of Beyond Transaction because I know that Scott is talking to a creative who has hacked all of the part of the chain. I want to be able to I want to see what Scott is doing with the people who are in manufacturing, how they're thriving, especially when manufacturing is a very difficult process in our part of the world where a lot of things are still being imported. How can we call it manufacturing or local manufacturing when we import the resources, that we use. So those are the people I will be talking to, and I want you to be able to ask those questions and get to hear what they are saying as well, and see the importance of the chain, because you can't fix a problem if you only look at it from an eye point of view. You have to look at it granularly. There are points where focus is important, but the truth is focus itself is blinding, because the moment you pin your eyes on one thing, you start being blind to everything else, and those things, they are ripples of whatever it is you're doing. You could solve a problem today thinking, because I focused on this one, it is solved now. But take a car, or an engine. Sometimes you tell yourself, okay, I think the problem here is the battery, so I'm going to fix the battery. However, your alternator might be the problem, right? So you change the battery because you were focused, the battery was not coming on. You change the battery, your alternator becomes the problem, because the reason your battery died is because the alternator is not working, it's not charging the battery, right? And you will put a new battery and it's going to go bad again. That's what focus does many times, because you're pinning your eye on the one problem that you see when the problem is a bit more granular, right? The battery is bad, the alternator is bad. Why is the alternator bad? It could be because part of the pipes that connect to the alternator have gotten rusted. And why did they get rusted? I was putting water in my radiator, right? You see how the collective of the engine tells you that the problem is bigger than what it is or what you see. And you have to solve it from a holistic point of view. And maybe when you see it, you can say, okay, let's prioritize. Because up until the point of prioritization, focus is a trap, right? If you're not prioritizing yet and you're focusing just because you've seen one problem, it's a trap in itself. It blinds you. And that's what Beyond Transaction wants to kind of get rid of. We want to see the chain for what it is. Talk to all the people across the chain. Talk to the people that are thriving across the chain. See how they are thriving. See what they've done and how we can replicate it one small way or the other. And the hope is that at some point, we will not just have fintech giants. We would have manufacturing giants. We'll have unicorns in manufacturing in this part of the world. We'll have distribution giants, people who have built logistic companies that are working. I'm not talking about logistic companies that raise money for valuation purposes and die, but that they raise money and they thrive. They become global entities. We all know of DHL. We all know of FedEx. We need a Nigerian brand that is that big, that is that global, because when you can't mention PayPal and not mention Paystack, you can mention PayPal and not mention Flutterwave, because they are giants. We now need distribution giants as well. We need manufacturing giants. You can say the Techno Mobile, which is owned by a Nigerian but manufactured in China. We need to get to the point where we go. We have 200 million people. We have population for manufacturing. We can manufacture, right? If you fix that industry, people who say no jobs, there are factories. We're building that. And now you have a strong manufacturing giant as big as Transsion, that is Nigerian, or that is African, or that is West African, and this is manufacturing its own. We have CX, that is not Zendex, that is Nigerian or that is African, that is growing, that employs millions of people. This is what Beyond Transaction is hoping to solve, because if you see the people who are thriving there locally, we can be forced to start join them to be part of the chain. There is nothing wrong with staying in a line, right? You just make things orderly. And the good thing about a line is it's going to get to you at some point if you stay in the line.